All right, and on the who's who of the Joshua Perry Show, we have probably our biggest guest to date, somebody who I have just a ton of respect for, has had a huge impact on my life. Probably wouldn't be here doing all the cool things I'm doing without him. Three-time national championship winning coach, current Fox Sports and Big Ten Network analyst, Urban Meyer, one of my favorite people. Welcome to the Joshua Perry Show.
I can't tell you how great it is to be with you, Josh. Awesome.
Now, I'm looking forward to this interview. Let's start with some of the obvious news. Currently in college football, Big Ten, Pac-12 cancellation. What do you make of the situation?
Well, I'm a big believer. Everybody's responsible for their personal responsibility, their personal behavior. If you make a mistake, we've had some players and some people make some mistakes and they're held accountable. But I also believe if you've done everything right, that it's hard for me to accept the fact that you're not playing or you're not doing something you love. And I get both sides of the story. I am just heartbroken, devastated, because I'm not sure the average person, or I shouldn't say average person, the average fan or the media person really understands. Football, they see number 37, number 11, number 5, number 1, Justin Fields. They see these kids come out there and perform. And then it's a little bit like when you're a doctor or you're some high-end profession that just takes inordinate amount of time. When I say inordinate, you're working. I did the study one year. For every minute of football, it's 70 hours or some crazy number for every minute of actual football. And it very rarely in life do you get the perfect storm, I call it, and that is high-end people and high-end talent. A lot of times you just don't quite know. I've done that for 35 years, and you have 35 teams that have been a part of that. Yeah, sure you do, but then sometimes you have some issues. This team was built, and it really became high-end in all areas.
And that's, I think, one of the toughest things, like you said, is these guys came back to campus. They did their protocols. They were doing everything right. And the numbers were supporting it. Gene Smith and the athletic directors all across the Big Ten were letting everybody know how everything was working. And we got to a point where we had a schedule. And it all just evaporated. And I think that's the biggest thing. If you're a fan, that's tough to swallow. But imagine as a player in that locker room, as a coach, all the time that you spend away from your family and all the time that you have during the summer to maybe get out of town, that you would say, no, I'm going to be there around my team because we're getting ready for a season where you can win a championship. It's so tough. And obviously now Ryan Day has some new obstacles in terms of how he communicates with parents, how he communicates with the student athletes, and how he communicates on the recruiting trail. If you're him, how do you attack that obstacle?
Well, and ironically, I just talked to Ryan, and I think that, and it's really hard to do, focus on the moment. Yeah, there are some big picture issues right now, but here's reality. Reality is, number one, the most important people, always. I would always tell presidents and ADs this: I really don't work for you. I work for the families of the student athletes. There's no profession anywhere like what college coaches do. They go into your home. They hug your mom, hug your dad, and I've done it on both ends as a coach and as a parent, and I'm going to give you my kid. And I expect you to fight as hard as you can for that kid. If not, you're going to have a problem that you don't want to have a problem, because that's people's children. So it's a very raw emotion. So number one is the reality is that these players are hurting. Keep that in mind. The heck with commissioners and ADs, coach. The players are the ones. Their shelf life is that big. They only have, Josh, you played for 3 or 4 years. That's it. It's over. You can't go back. Coaches go on, ADs go on, commissioners, honestly, who cares? They got a long shelf life. They can do whatever they want to do. Their time in the sun is over. It's the opportunity for the players. That's number one. Number two is the fiscal reality of what's about to hit. And that is not by design. Football players shouldn't have to support every other sport. Football players shouldn't have to support all these incredible salaries and facilities. There's a brand new tennis facility going up. There's this going up, all kinds of great things. And I had a player ask me that one time. Well, Reggie Bush actually said that. So why do we have to put ourselves in harm's way for that other stuff? I can't answer that. However, that's what's going on. So those are the two things to keep in mind. Number one, and by far the most important, is the student athlete is hurting right now. What plan do we have for them? Number two, the fiscal reality that you're going to drop sports, which I'm very, talk about raw emotion. I told you a second ago, my oldest daughter played volleyball at Georgia Tech. She's a president of a company. And she'd be the first to tell you the reason she is so good at her job is she understands team. She understands diversity. She understands selflessness and putting something ahead of self. Where else do you learn that? Do you learn that in your psychology class in college? Maybe you do. I don't know. I never did. And then my other daughter, second daughter, owns her own company. She's a volleyball player, a national champion wakeboarder at Florida Gulf Coast. So they understand, and they'd be the first to say that I learned from team. And I'm horrified about that, Josh.
Yeah, and I was going to say that's a huge impact, just talking about the athletes. Like you said, I think that there are experiences that I had at Ohio State I wouldn't have had anywhere else. And we'll talk about those later on in the show. But sports puts you in situations that are adverse, and it forces you to work a lot of times with people that you don't always like and you don't always get along with. And so the athletes get that in terms of the skills that they can build for their careers and socialization and everything else. But when you're talking about mental health for these athletes who are now going to be outside of their structure and their normal routine, when you talk about, like you said, the shelf life of a football player, I played 4 years at Ohio State. I played 3 years in the league, and now I'm done. Wasn't a long time to play. There are going to be so many implications by canceling, postponing, whatever you want to call it, fall sports that I don't know what the ramifications will be, but some of these athletes are going to be struggling in a bad way.
And you go back to how do people handle that? There's the above the line. I don't want to get too deep on my book, above the line, below the line. Above the line, it was intention with purpose. And that means your faith. That means your family. That means, that ship has sailed. Okay, now focus on my academics or train hard. That's above the line. You are dealt a terrible event just happened. What do? Press pause, calm down. Okay, now what do I do if I'm an elite athlete? I train like an animal for the NFL. I work so hard. I hire the right people around me, and I get ready to go. That's above the line. If I'm a returning player, I just work really hard, do great in school, et cetera, et cetera. Below the line, I'm going to start drinking. I'm going to start, maybe hanging out with people that are also in bad places. And unfortunately, the separation between two is at times catastrophic. You've seen it. I've seen it. My heart's still broken over some things that I saw that I can't believe that individual made that decision to do that. But once again, we're all held accountable. But there's above the line, below the line. You've been trained for 5 years on that, Josh, and so is our program, that press pause. Okay, this happened. What's the best thing to do? And impulsive behavior is not good by anybody. Take your time and think the thing through.
No, and that's going to be a tough thing, though. Like, we train it all the time, and I'm very thankful from coming from one of those environments. But I'm thinking about some of the guys from other schools that maybe haven't had that same training, some people that are newer in the program that haven't maybe broken some of their old habits, which, it's really hard to break some of those habits sometimes. It's going to be definitely difficult. But transitioning, thinking about a potential spring season, I know that you don't like it. I think it's a terrible idea. Why are you opposed to a spring season?
Oh, all about, I think the answer. Number one is a player. You start with the player and you end with the player. Are you really willing to put someone in a 2 seasons in a calendar year? I don't think that's going to happen. That, first of all, that's not going to happen.
No, it can't happen.
You start talking about April, May, that's not what I saw someone come up with something, and that's, first of all, no one will allow that to happen. I'm telling you right now, my son's playing college football. They told me he's out. He's not playing college football. I'm not putting that kid in harm's way like that. You don't do that. However, the January, February model that Ryan Day and Gene Smith and some of the Big Ten is looking at, it's going to give some of these players an opportunity. I look at a Justin Hilliard, who has earned the right to go play professional football. I love that man. How we all feel about that kid. He's earned that right. If a 6-game season, 8-game season will help him get film on the tape, get something on tape to get him in the NFL, go do it. But the further you move it back, you're going to have to adjust the fall, because you can't ask players. You just can't. Your body needs to heal. And football, that's why in spring practice, guys that played, guys that started a bunch of games, you weren't scrimmaging. We practiced 3-4 days a week, and I would pull those guys out. Remember the 1,000 rep club and 2,000 rep club? 2,000 rep club, you didn't practice. You did shorts, and you just can't put your head, neck, and shoulder areas in those kind of conflict.
Yeah, and I remember that was a big thing actually after the 2014 season because we ended up playing in so many games. Our guys are veteran guys in the spring. They were out there obviously getting the work in. We were doing the individual drills and all the fundamental stuff. But when it came to the high velocity, high contact scrimmage reps, you guys were smart enough and you pulled back. And that's the other thing that I worry about. Absolutely. When you start getting late into that spring end of the semester, April, May territory, it's going to be really tough to ask those guys to turn back around and play some more football. All right, let's start hitting a little bit of a different topic. So we'll talk about your coaching career a little bit, the illustrious coaching career. So you're a baseball guy, played some baseball back in the day, also played football at Cincinnati. So you had a couple of different options and where to go career-wise, and you decided that you wanted to take it, and for a number of reasons, invest it into the football side. When you were done with your football playing career, you decided to get into coaching. Why did you want to be a coach?
I knew at a very young age. My dad used to tell a story. He was about 7 or 8 years old, and we were walking at, ironically, a University of Cincinnati football game. He was a graduate, and we were walking right along. They had a track around the field, and I still somewhat remember it. There was a defense coordinator. I later found out who that was. Ended up being a famous coach, but he had a chalkboard out, and I just was mesmerized with the players all sitting around this coach and the strategy and motivation and all the things that were going on. And I remember my dad tells the story. He said, I looked at him and said, I want to do that someday. And he's like, wow. And I wanted to play as long as I could. I was better at baseball than football, and I was drafted. And so I signed and played a couple of years, had a couple of injuries I was dealing with. And also they quit letting me hit with aluminum bats, and I had to use a wooden bat. So that career, I played 2 years there. Then I went and played college football. Probably went a little higher. I should have been a little lower level, but I wanted to go to Cincinnati because that's where my dad went. And I went there, and then I started a coaching career that I knew. I was studying Bobby Bowden, Joe Paterno, Bo Schembecker, Woody Hayes, and Tom Osborne. I would read books, and I don't know if this generation does, but we used to have football cards. Everyone had the football and baseball cards in my generation. I actually would read articles on these coaches, and it was kind of, I look back now and say not many people were doing that, but I was enamored by leadership. I was enamored by culture and the human spirit. I thought these coaches, Tom Osborne was a guy that really struck me, and I would take these articles and I would pin them up against my wall. And it was back, how about this, Josh? Tom Osborne was the pioneer of weight training. Before Tom Osborne, not many people know this, but I did. And I just, because I studied it. And so I was just enamored by it.
No, it's really fascinating. I feel like that mentality is common among people who become elite at what they do is they study the best and they become obsessed with the traits and the things that the best in their industry have done. And so that kind of leads into my next question. You're early on in a coaching career as a head coach, but you're gaining a ton of success. You're winning Coach of the Year awards. You're winning national championships. All of that is hard to sustain. What was the thing that probably drove you the most?
I hate to say it, after you started winning, I did it for the love of the game, and I did it for the love of player and making an impact in people's life. When I first got in 2001 as a head coach, I made $100,000. There wasn't, I'm not saying that's very good money, but relative to what's going on now and for the time you put into something, we were somewhat survival mode, raising 3 children and all the things I had to do. And so it had nothing to do with financial rewards. It's just the fact that you would beat your opponent. And then I went to Utah, and that was probably the most fun I've ever had. We were so good. We were doing things offensively, and during a game you'd almost smile because you'd be like, these people have no idea how to stop this. And we had a great quarterback, Alex Smith. And then we go to Florida, and things got real serious. You start stepping in the swamp and the SEC, and we won the national championship in 2006. And I remember, probably an hour and a half after it all ended, you remember that, all the confetti's done and celebrate and dance in the locker room and all that. And you sit back, and I said, go get my father and go get Earl Bruce, my mentor. And we went and sat way in the bowels of the stadium, deep in the stadium. And I looked at my dad and I said, I can't believe this happened. And from this point forward, I'm playing on house money. That means I'm just doing this for fun. And because you can never take that championship away from us. What happened, Josh, everything became a national championship. Recruiting, if we lost a player in recruiting, I lost my mind. You can imagine,
Mhm.
you know me pretty well. We, God forbid, if we lost a game, we lost a couple, not many, but it was like the world came to an end. And so everything became, and it was taking time from two things that in my mind, you can't, they're constants that you, as you grow up and get married and have a family, number one is your faith. Number two is your family. You just can't. And I was cutting deep into those. And it was impacting me in a really bad way because I felt it. I felt I was becoming that guy that I hated, the guy that the old guy that sits, maybe made some money, maybe has a couple trophies, but he missed his kids grow up. He missed that relationship with his kids, maybe his wife, and and I had no issues with that, but I just felt like I was not doing my job as a husband and a father.
No, and I think it's big that you talk about that experience, and you obviously learned from that too, because when you got to Ohio State, I feel like it was as family friendly all around as it could get. Like you welcome parents into practices, and you had the coaches' families there, and obviously we spent a ton of time around your family. I know all of your kids. I know your wife really really well, and I can appreciate somebody obviously where you're at the top and you have to take a step back and evaluate because it's so easy to get hyper focused on just having that success and not paying attention to the other things that are really important in life too. I want to talk about your time at OSU. So one of my favorite stories to tell, the first conversation I ever had with you when you told me I wasn't good enough to play at Ohio State. I got to tell
That's
it.
not the first
It's
conversation.
absolutely the first conversation that we had, Coach. The first conversation on campus that we had. You said
In a hallway by the meeting room there.
that's exactly where it was.
Wow.
And but that was, I think that was your mentality and approach though. And I've heard you talk about it before. When you got to Ohio State, you had an expectation of one thing and you walked into something different. And you then became obsessed with attacking that job and bringing it back and making it the place that you had seen when you were there, the place that you wanted it to be. What was that experience like?
I came from the SEC, and football is very important. And it might sound funny to say that, but football is very important in the SEC. I mean, it's a way of life, it's a religion, and it is. And they don't apologize for that. I came to the Big Ten, and I had I had this vision of Ohio State because Ohio State, the Big Ten used to be the strongest conference. And I got there, and I saw antiquated facilities. I saw lack of creativity. I quite honestly saw a roster that wasn't good enough. I saw recruiting that was not at the level that you need to go win at that level. I watched all the film, and I cringed a little bit, to be quite honest with you, about the lack of speed and lack of athleticism at the positions, especially like D-line and even Shelley, who she knows football. She goes, "How in the world are you going to beat the SEC? It's not going to happen." And I know you. And she looked at me. She goes, "I know you. That'll drive you insane." And I said, "Well, we're going to do it. You watch." And I challenged the Big Ten. I challenged the coaches. With some people, once again, and the feelings have not been that important to me in professional business. It's I told you who I work for. I work for the players. I want Josh Perry to look back and say that was I didn't say easy, but the most gratifying, rewarding 4 years of my life. And there's really only one way at a place like Ohio State. Yes, great education, great teammates. The horseshoe's incredible, but you better win. Because look at all the programs, who comes back. Josh Perry will always be welcome back with his family and show pictures. That was my dream. I always want the players to come back and say, "Look what your father did." The players that lose, they never come back. So I wanted to make that. And so we just challenged everybody. I challenged myself, Gene Smith. I challenged, we were able to hire some great coaches, assistant coaches. Our recruiting went, the real life Wednesday component just made us be able to go recruit anyone in the country. And you start going into Georgia and some of the talent areas where, because of the population shift, there is a little more talent, and you start bringing that to Ohio, you have what you have now. And that's one of the top 2 or 3 programs in America.
No doubt. And you talk about that challenge. Like, I want people to understand when Coach is saying that we challenge each other, what he means is he's standing up in the front of the meeting room and he's calling you out based off of what's on tape that everybody can see. And he is telling you that either you're going to correct what you're doing wrong on tape or you're not going to. And if you don't, then you're not invested in the team. And it wasn't just players. He was doing the same thing with coaches. It's like, hey, if your player is playing that type of technique and that's not what we teach as a coach, you either fix that or you're not coaching how we want you to coach here. And being in a crucible like that every day where you go in and you know that everything is going to be scrutinized, like you said, it's not the most, easy experience you ever had. It's not about that though. It's how can we mold people and get the results that we want. So people, when they come back 20 years from now, they can say that those were the best years of my life because we were elite and we did everything we needed to do.
So Kerry Combs one time, Josh, you'll appreciate this. And obviously I think Kerry's as good as I've ever been around. And he said, we were having our year-end evaluation and I go through it and I had a very honest conversation with every coach. And he said, these hard conversations are really good. And I go, Kerry, what do you mean hard conversation? And he looks at me, I go, you mean like honest? Like we're having an honest conversations. You're not used to these or I guess I grew up in a household with my father and just, it cracks me up today that I hear that all the time. I said, boy, those are hard conversations. And I'm like, hard. It's an injustice to you. If Josh Perry would have walked down the hallway and I said, Josh, you're one of the finest football players I've ever seen in high school. And you'd be the first guy I'd offer at Ohio State first of all, I'm lying to you. Second of all, if I'm you, I've lost all confidence in me as a coach because deep down, you know the truth. You were nowhere near. God gave you an incredible mind, heart, yet you weren't there yet. And so it's my job to say, okay, there is greatness in Josh Perry. Let's go find it. But for God's sakes, be honest. I mean, it doesn't mean I don't love you. It doesn't mean, a matter of fact, it means I love you more. It's no different when you raise a child. If your kid's screwing around, hey man, that's okay. It's not okay. We got to fix it because you have a long life ahead of you.
And that's the deal too. Like you said, that confidence aspect, and that's built over time within a team. But if I lie to you, then you're not going to trust me. You don't have confidence in me anymore. And that's the most damaging thing that can happen within a team is you lose that feedback channel of confidence and trust. Now everybody's kind of looking around for answers. So obviously you talked a little bit about the recruiting. You were the recruiting king. Like you were the guy. You said it, you changed the Big Ten in the mentality of how you recruit, the type of players you want to bring in, the budget that you use to recruit those kind of players. And so everywhere you went, you had legit guys, but it wasn't just about chasing 5 stars. You were looking at a specific personality type of a guy as well. On the recruiting trail, how were you able to kind of figure out these guys' personalities without having as much contact with them as you might have had in a different scenario?
What a great question. This is where I grew. Bill Belichick became a dear friend, and he would come down to me in Florida. And by the second year, I knew we would sit for 4 hours, 5 hours, and he would go through every player, not just the high draft picks, but free agents. And when he had a set criteria that he looked for, and by the time, once I knew him very well, I knew I had it all done for him because I knew what he was looking for. And I was like, wait a minute, in recruiting, do I have set criteria? I don't. I listen to my coaches. If you have great athleticism, you run fast, we'll take you. And that changed my last half of Florida. And then here we had set criteria. And the criteria are this: number one, competitive spirit. Are you an elite competitor? Number two, are you tough? I mean, this is a tough man's game. Are you a tough guy? And there's ways I can go through the analytics and how you find all that stuff out. Number three, are you a leader? Can you elevate yourself and elevate others in difficult times? Number four, are you intelligent? This is a complex game. I didn't say you need to be a 4.0, but you have to have the cognitive ability to maneuver this complicated game. And number five, are you adaptable? What makes Patrick Mahomes and some of these great players and coaches elite is the ability to adapt to any situation, to any person. And those are the 5 qualities I look for. And I had those in Sharpie above our board. If you're coaching for me, Josh, you'd come in and say, I want to recruit Josh Perry. Does Josh fit these 5 criteria? What's ironic is Joe Burrow, I know he went on and had a great career, but Joe Burrow was not recruited, yet he fit all 5 criteria. So we took him. You take Zeke Elliott, who wasn't a great, he was a really good high school player, but he fit the criteria. JT Barrett, Josh Perry, we would have recruited you because you fit those 5 criteria. So we got better. And in the big picture, the amount of recruiting mistakes we made relatively none, because we fit that we had players fit that criteria.
No, and I know at Ohio State, there's obviously going to be roster turnover and guys are going to transfer, especially when it's highly competitive and somebody wants to play. But the one thing that we really didn't have, which I felt like was a point of pride when I talked about my teams, were the guys that were getting kicked out of school because of academic issues or social issues or whatever it was. And it really does go back to that personality type and bringing in those guys that you know are going to fit the culture of what you're trying to build. So that's really, really good insight there.
Someone asked me, Josh, real quick about, character and those type of things, and I put that all under competitor. So
mhm.
if you're an elite competitor, that means you do have to be strong academically. That means you can't be a drug, addicted to, or just a social misfit, or dysfunctionally, that you just can't take care of yourself. Because the elite competitors understand, for me to compete at my very best on Saturday, I have to do Monday through Saturday.
Yep.
And I'm not saying we were perfect, because no one's perfect, but the competitive spirit to me handles a lot of those questions.
No, I think the leadership category does as well, because
Right.
that's how you end up at a place where you have 7 captains a year at Ohio State. Is you have so many elite leaders on your team that you can't pick 3 or 4 guys, because you have 7 of them that fit the bill and that are really well respected.
That's a great point. I mean, you hit that right on. I'm going to use that from now on. You're exactly right.
So this will be an interesting question. How much did recruiting kids in 2001 change versus recruiting kids in 2018?
Oh, much different. The social media craze, and how early it happened. I'm not a fan of it, to be honest with you, Josh. I did it. I believe a head coach should watch someone play their senior year in high school, and I believe a player should decide, not be forced to make decisions or sophomore year. Because what happens if, I'm trying to think, you get a player like a Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow, if ever all recruiting was done like it is now, Joe Burrow would never got a scholarship at Ohio State. We had to go watch him, and so I just worry about, everybody's pushing the envelope about recruiting earlier and earlier, and football is a developmental sport. I worry about, I can't stand how we treat these junior and high schools, where I have there's TV people saying, well, I think he's going to be a high draft pick. He's what are you talking about? And the kid hears that.
Right.
And the family hears that, and then all of a sudden you get this enormous pressure put on this darn kid that's a sophomore in high school, that the family said, hey, he's going to be able to take care of us because he's going to be a multi-million-dollar athlete. But that's not fair. So I think the air is out of that balloon. I don't see that going backwards. To say I'm a fan of it, I'm not.
All right, let's jump on 2014 real quick. That was a unique year, obviously. Very, very special team. If you could sum up what made that team special, what do you think it was?
It was relentless. They were that was the hardest working team I've ever been around. Hardest working team. And you had a couple people that I still to this day give so much credit to, and that was darn Curtis Grant, man.
Yep.
I mean, Curtis Grant was a guy that I was ready to have him walk out of the program. As a matter of fact, Luke Fickle and I both encouraged him it was time to move on.
Mm-hmm.
And Evan Spencer. Evan Spencer is a guy that I saw him the other day, and I want to hug the kid every time I see him, because he put everything ahead of self. And so did Curtis Grant. Remember, Curtis Grant took a kid like Raekwon McMillan, who was the #1 linebacker in America, and mentored him so well that he would play at times in front of him.
Yep.
How do you, in today's society, think about that for a minute? That's why we all are forever indebted to players like Curtis Grant and Evan Spencer. You have the Josh Perrys and you have the Zeke Elliott's, and he's incredible, who were great leaders too. But those two really stuck out to me, that it was the epitome of selflessness, which, as we called, that was the term we used throughout the year, solve the mystery. Yep. And the mystery is, how do you put something ahead of self?
And I'll say, for Curtis Grant, I don't think I've ever been around a player that had more of an impact on my career than Curtis did, because I watched all of the up and down that Curtis had. But, when he decided he was going to be all in on his senior year at Ohio State, he was bringing me along everywhere with him. We were doing film studies on Mondays. We were in there for 2 hours breaking down tape, and he would bring Raekwon in, and we would do all those things. And throughout the week, we had a routine, and we did everything together. And it was, Mike linebacker and Will linebacker, the way it's supposed to be. And we communicated off the field, and we communicated on the field. And just to watch somebody who had to overcome and had a lot of disappointment in their career have that same mentality to just finish it off the right way. I don't think a lot of people would be able to do that. And like you said, especially knowing a cat like Raekwon is coming for his job and he's still bringing him along too. It was a very special thing. I think it was just a really special team.
One of those teams that I don't know if you'll really see many like that again. You take your third string quarterback, absolutely illogical. Yet that team, did Cardell change? This is really interesting. Cardell changed. And he'd be the first to tell you, did he change because of the NFL contract? No. Did he change for his love for Ohio State? No. Did he change for his coach? No. He changed for the ultimate transformational piece of your life, and that's for the brotherhood. That's for love and ownership. It became his team. And he even told me with tears rolling down his face the Monday or the day after the game, I was like, man, what happened? I mean, here's a guy that had some issues, always been a good guy, but just had issues. And he said, I could not let my teammates down. And I to this day, I just get, isn't that the fundamental of waking up in the morning? Imagine how this country's got a lot of bad stuff going on. Mm-hmm. Imagine if that somehow permeated through our country, that I could not let my brother down. I mean, problem solved.
Yeah. No, I mean, that was literally our whole mentality is like, you get it. It sucks getting up every day at 5:30 a.m. and going to workouts and then going to class and coming back. And, coach, you're in the facility all daggone day long. And you don't do that for yourself. You do that because you have a lot of people depending on you and you want to make them proud and you want to be successful and elite with them. So it's really good point there. Your last year at Ohio State, and we've talked about it a little bit, was obviously bittersweet, but you had the opportunity to end your career at Ohio State with a victory in the Rose Bowl. And that was a game that I never played in, but as a Big Ten fan, I always had a ton of reverence and love for watching the Rose Bowl. How did it feel ending your career with the win in that game?
Well, I got hired in December 2011 after taking a year off from Florida, and I was set to just take some time off. And football is such a grind, and my daughters were involved in volleyball, and I wanted to just do a good job as a father. And so Ohio State, I prayed on it. The job came open. It was the only job I would have taken. Gene Smith, the way we handled it is, hey, we lost 7 games for the first time since the 1800s. We are on probation. We have these issues going on. We need your help. And I looked at Shelly, and she was opposed to it. I said, I'm going to go do this. And she's like, she didn't want me to. And it's one of the few arguments I ever won. And we went on that journey. And so I remember standing in the press conference saying that, this is personal. I'm from near Cleveland, Ohio. I had the greatest childhood. I had the greatest high school coaches. I love the Buckeyes since I could say the word Buckeye, and the school spirit, the Columbus, Ohio. And I said, I'm going to swing as hard as I can. And then I'm not going to do this till I'm 7 years old. I've had some health things. I have that cyst that I dealt with. And so Bob Stoops kind of set the precedent when he found the right guy. He kind of made the same decision. He wanted to retire at a young age, go enjoy his life and his family and give back. And I kind of went on a journey. I'm going to find this right guy, and I found him. Ryan Day, I hired him. I didn't really know it was him when I hired him. If you look at Ryan Day, got fired his last 2 jobs. He got fired at the Eagles and fired at the 49ers. And I knew he was great, though. But when he got in, I realized he was elite in everything. So the season, obviously, we had I had the issue at the beginning with the suspension. And then we had a tough injury. Nick Bosa went down, our best player, our toughest guy. We had a horrible loss. We weren't playing well on defense, but we scrapped and fought and went 13-1. And as a player or coach, I'd never been to the Rose Bowl. I dreamed of it. I came so close so many times to go in the Rose Bowl. And to go out there, it was even better than I dreamed it to be, especially – if we lost that darn game, I wouldn't say that, but we won the game and handed the team off in great shape to Ryan Day.
That's a really special end to your career too. And knowing the guy that you're going to hand the team off to and knowing it's in good hands probably had to be a great feeling. I have to ask this question. Do you ever get the itch to coach?
All the time. Yeah, all the time. And I don't see it happening, but all the time. And, and then it doesn't last as long as it did right when I stopped. I still get the competitive. I can't watch games like a normal person. I'm always, how would I do this situation?
Yep.
The good thing is I have so many colleagues that I'm constantly in conversation about. Ryan Day and I talk every day. I just had breakfast with the basketball coach, Chris Holtman. And so it's an opportunity to give back in a different way. But yeah, I have the itch, but once again, not to the point where I think I'm going to go do it again.
So talking about being connected to the game and everything, you've got Job doing a great job as a college football analyst. How are you liking that role? I know you did it one time before the last time you retired, but you're killing it right now.
Yeah, I was scared I wasn't going to enjoy it, and I'm not retired. I'm as busy as I've ever been, but people laugh. You're sitting around a lot. No, I don't sit around at all. But Fox is incredible. Big Ten Network's incredible. They take the approach in which I wanted is to, if you want to really learn football, come watch us, because you have Reggie Bush, you have Matt Leinart, Brady Quinn, Rob Stone, myself, people that are still somewhat relevant in the game that, they haven't been out of it forever. Very diverse group. The West Coast, Notre Dame, Ohio State. But they give me the opportunity to teach the game that I love and I know. And not just the X and O's, but the recruiting, the human spirit, the motivation, inspiration involved in getting athletes to do some really tough things. So I actually really, really enjoy it.
No, I can see the interest in it, because like I'll look, and you get that look in your eyes too when you're doing studio for one of the big games. Like you're breaking it down and you're intense and you're really taking it all in. And I can see also with the preparation and the delivery how much effort that you put into what you're doing. And I have no expectation that you would do it any other way. That's just how you are. But it's really cool to see how you've really taken that competitive spirit that you talked a lot about, and you've put it into this new role, because easily one of the most fun people to watch in the industry. So I'm going to end it off with this 2-minute drill. I do this with all the interviews, but it's a rapid fire of questions. Just got a handful of questions for you. I want you to answer them without really thinking about the answer. How's that sound?
Yeah.
All right. So we'll start off with the first one. What's your dream vacation?
Sarasota, Florida.
Sarasota, Florida. Surf or turf?
Surf.
If you had one superpower, what would it be?
Incredible strength.
Okay. Who is the best player you've ever coached against?
Against? Doggone it. Let me think. You got me there. I think Julio Jones.
Julio Jones. That's a hell of an answer. What's the best advice you've ever gotten?
The best advice I ever got is, my father, and it's just, there's no gray area. There's right and wrong, and do right.
What is your biggest pet peeve?
Pet peeve is narrative. That's a pet peeve of mine.
That's an expected answer from you. I'm 100% on board with that. And then finally, if they were making a movie about your life, who plays Urban Meyer?
Kevin Costner.
Okay.
I just love Kevin Costner. I don't.
That was the quickest answer you had. You had that one lined up, Coach.
Yeah, it's a great movie. I highly recommend it for love of the game. My son and I watch it all the time. We've probably seen it 30 times. He's an old retired pitcher, so go watch it someday.
Fantastic. Well, Coach, I appreciate you joining us on the Joshua Perry Show. It's always great to catch up with you. The insight from this conversation, I feel like, is going to be really impactful. Like, there were some great nuggets about, building a team and how to eliminate the gray area in your life and being a good father and husband and everything else. So I appreciate you spending some time.
Love and respect, my man.
Love you too.